Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you very much for getting yourself here tonight. I know we've all been cooking and doing laundry and organizing things, and it's always a bit of a mission to do something in the evenings, but thank you very much. And a few of you I know, and some of you I don't know. So the people that I haven't met before, thank you very much for trusting your recommendations and for joining in today. So, plant-based nutrition for children and teens. First of all, so my aim today, my aim for you is that you go away tonight with an understanding of the health benefits and the potential problems of plant-based nutrition for this age group. And just a little bit of context, I will be talking about plant-based nutrition just in terms of health pros and cons, and I won't be discussing the ethical and environmental impacts of that because that's not my specialist area. A quick little bit about me. So I'm a nutritional therapist. I trained at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition in London, but I also have a degree in biochemistry and chemistry. But about last year, I decided to specialize in this age group and work with children and teenagers, not completely exclusively, but I absolutely love this age group. They're brilliant to work with. But of course, when you're working with children and teenagers, you're also working with the parents because they're usually the ones that are providing the food. So it's a great kind of family sort of team effort, really. I also have three children, two teenagers and an early teen. So I'm kind of living it and breathing it and doing it. And people ask me why I do these webinars, and I feel that a lot of nutrition out there, there's a lot of information out there. It's almost a bit overwhelming. And I feel a lot of it is quite complicated and a bit scary. And I really want to show parents that actually you can feed your families healthy food and it doesn't have to be really complicated with lots of whizzy ingredients and really time consuming. It is possible. And so that's why I want to kind of share my knowledge with you and help us on this kind of journey together. So, what is plant-based nutrition? So, a quick Google search, when you Google plant-based nutrition, it says it's a diet based mostly on plants. So, when we talk about plant-based nutrition, it doesn't necessarily mean vegetarian or vegan diets, but often when we hear the word plant-based, I kind of think of vegan and vegetarian. But plant-based is basically a diet that is mostly plants, and then it includes all the other things. But what do we actually mean by plants? So again, when we talk about plants, most people think, oh, fruit and vegetables. But we mustn't forget that it's also things like your beans and lentils, it's nuts and seeds. It's also the grains, things like your wheat, things like your oats, quinoa, barley, all those sort of things. They are plants as well. And we mustn't forget herbs and spices because they are derived from plants. So that's plant-based nutrition. Vegetarian diets. So usually people on vegetarian diets, they do include eggs and dairy products. Some vegetarians do eat fish. Some vegetarians choose not to, and so that's where the expression kind of flexitarian has come in a little bit. It's a bit more flexible. And then of course vegan diets where there's no animal products at all, so no eggs, no dairy, and that really is only plant nutrition. Um, and I know vegan diets have become quite popular in England recently. And what's quite interesting, I live down in France, for the people that don't know me. And what's quite interesting is that it's not a thing at all here in France. I find that quite fascinating. It's just not, we can buy a few vegan products, but it's not mainstream at all. I'm sure it will come, but it's quite an interesting a cultural thing. So plants, why are plants so good? Why is it so good for us to eat lots of plants? Okay, so plants, we all know, contain fiber, and fiber, roughage, helps keep us regular, helps keep everything in the digestive tract moving through. Fiber also in the digestive tract binds to toxins, binds to hormones, it binds to things like cholesterol and removes them from the body. So fiber is very, very important for that kind of sort of cleaning you out a little bit, keeping the digestive system and the rest of the body healthy. But fiber also, and this is where the research has really exploded in the last few years, fiber feeds the gut bacteria. So in our digestive tracts, we've got all these bacteria, most of them hopefully good bugs, some of them not so good bugs, but the good bugs love fiber. That's their food. And what it does, they break the fiber down and produce all these amazing compounds that are brilliant for us. But different gut bugs feed on different fibers. So the fiber from apple will feed a different gut bug from the fiber from grapes, and the fiber from herbs and spices will feed a different gut bug from fiber from carrots, for example. So the more types of fiber we eat, that helps feed a whole diversity of bacteria in our digestive tract. And it's this diversity that is really, really good, because these gut bugs are producing all these compounds. So what do gut bugs do? So they help digest things. So the lactobacillus bacteria help digest lactose. They also produce vitamins, things like B vitamins that help us extract energy from food. They produce natural antibiotics. They keep the bad bugs at bay. And they also produce compounds that communicate with our nervous system, that communicate with our brain, and of course, huge impact on our immune system. So this is why it's so good to eat lots of plants. It provides the fiber that feeds the gut bugs. Plants also, you can see from this lovely picture, contain lots of coloured compounds, your polyphenols, your anthocyanidins, the purple pigments. And again, the gut bugs love these different coloured compounds, but also these compounds have antioxidant capacities that have immune supporting properties as well. So that's why it's a good idea to include lots of plants. But, and here's the little caveat that comes into working with children and teenagers, fiber is very filling. So there may be a situation for a certain group where we have to be a little bit careful with filling our children too much up with fiber. If you have a child that is struggling to put weight on, for example, if you have a child with an appetite that's not very huge, you don't want to be filling them up with fiber that basically has no calories. So that's just where you need to keep a little bit of an eye on that. Fiber, as well as sort of binding to toxins and things we don't want in our body, it also binds to minerals such as iron and zinc. And these are minerals that we need to keep an eye on for certain diets. So we just need to kind of bear that in mind a little bit with fiber. So vegetarian diets, what do we need to be careful about? So with a vegetarian diet, when we talk about the macros, your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. So protein, we need to just keep an eye that a vegetarian child is getting enough protein. So I say make sure there's some protein at every meal, particularly at breakfast. If you've got a very active child or a child that does a lot of sport, their protein requirements will be more than a child that is less active. If you have a child who struggles with energy and perhaps blood sugar control isn't so great, you need to really make sure they're getting enough protein, because that can be very stabilizing on blood sugar. Also, if you've got a child with a very big appetite, very high energy, their protein demands are more. Now, you can do these calculations about how much protein a child needs. And it's a bit out of the scope of this webinar, but for example, my 17-year-old son who weighs 63 kilos, the research says that he needs about 60 grams of protein a day. So that's about 20 grams at each meal. And that can be a bit tricky to get on a vegetarian diet unless you're really thinking about it properly. So it's just something to keep an eye out for. Now, carbs, vegetarian diets tend to be quite high in carbohydrate. Now, this is not a problem if it's the slower releasing carbohydrates, so more of the sort of brown rice, brown pasta, potatoes, fruits and vegetables sort of carbohydrates, rather than the kind of beigey junk effectively. With teenagers, watch if you have a vegetarian child with bad skin, with bad acne. Sometimes, not always, the driving force behind acne can be these blood sugar spikes and these insulin spikes that then drive the hormonal changes that can cause acne. And if the diet is quite high in carbohydrates, that can be implicated in that. So again, keep an eye out for that. Talking about the fats, omega-3s can be tricky to get with vegetarian diets, because if you're not eating oily fish, you have to get your omega-3s from seeds, and you have to then convert the omega-3s from seeds into the specific omega-3 we need. But I would say across the board, children who are eating everything tend to have quite low omega-3 anyway, so we need to think about it for vegetarian diets, but I don't think it's an exclusive problem. So specific vitamins and minerals, and these vitamins and minerals here are the ones that the scientific studies are saying we need to keep an eye out for this particular group. So iron is needed to make red blood cells. It's also very important for the immune system. And I see low levels of iron comes up sort of more than I imagine in my children and teens. But the symptoms of iron deficiency or being a bit low, being a sort of tired and a sort of pale complexion, if you're at all worried, you can go and get a test with the GP. But of course, iron is found in meat and it is very well absorbed in meat. There are vegetarian sources and you get iron in eggs. So this is why eggs are brilliant for vegetarians. You can also get it in green leafy vegetables and dried fruit. And you can combine these foods with other foods, with vitamin C rich foods to help the absorption of iron. If you've got a very active child who's doing a lot of sport, their iron requirements will be more. If you have a teenage daughter with very heavy periods, think about the iron too, because they can lose a lot of iron every month. And if they're not replenishing it, the levels can go down. So zinc is found in meat, but also in nuts and seeds. And it tends to be one that teenage boys can be lacking in zinc, and it's implicated in skin as well. But nuts and seeds, you can get it. Selenium, I'm not ever so too worried about selenium. You can get selenium in Brazil nuts very easily. 3 Brazil nuts is your daily dose of selenium, and it's found in some grains. Calcium, I'm never too worried for a vegetarian diet if they're having, yogurt and milk and dairy products and cheese and things like that. Now, iodine is one that doesn't come up very often. We don't talk about it very often, but iodine is needed for the thyroid gland for growth and development and metabolism. And iodine is found in eggs, in yogurt, and in seafood. So again, I'm never too worried about that. B vitamins. B vitamins are found in grains, not too much of a problem. Vitamin A is quite unusual in developed countries. Vitamin D, sunshine, and if you came to my immunity webinar, you'd know that in England it is recommended that you supplement vitamin D in the winter. And we've talked about omega-3s. So in general, that's what you need to watch out for vegetarian diets. But what's the science saying? When we look at the scientific studies, what are they saying about vegetarian diets? So a study in April 2023 in the Nutrient Journal, so basically said that a lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet, which is where you're including dairy products and eggs, very low risk if you have a varied diet with a sufficient intake of dairy products. So if you've got a good vegetarian diet, very low risk. Another study in the American Academy of Pediatrics. So they basically measured the growth of vegetarian children versus non-vegetarian children, and they didn't see any difference in the growth measures. But the interesting thing was vegetarian diet was associated with high odds of being underweight. So again, this might be seen as a positive or it might be seen as a negative, and that would depend on the situation. So that's really what the science is saying about vegetarian diets. I'd say it's quite positive. Now let's talk about then vegan diets. Protein is more difficult because obviously you're not including the eggs and the dairy products and potentially fish. So with a vegan diet, you've really got to work at making sure you're getting protein in every meal and the complete protein. So you're mixing your beans and your grains throughout the day, ideally at every meal. So that means you're having kind of chickpeas with rice, or you're having quinoa with something else, because you need all those amino acids to construct everything. They tend to be, again, high in carbohydrates, as we discussed the vegetarian diets, and obviously high in fiber as well. But vegan diets tend to be even higher in carbohydrate because things like the beans and the chickpeas, although they contain protein, they also contain carbohydrate. And yes, it will be the slow releasing kinds of carbohydrate, but it's just something to bear in mind. So it's more difficult. I've put in brackets impossible because there are some nutrients that are impossible to get via diet alone. B12 is the classic one. Calcium can be quite an issue with the lack of dairy products. Now, of course, you get calcium from things like vegetables and green leaf vegetables, but you've got this absorption issue. So these minerals are not so well absorbed from plant sources. And so you have to have more of them. But of course, you're eating a lot of plant material with it. So it can be difficult. So, and vitamin D, those are the biggest risk factors for those three nutrients, but I would say there are more as well. So let's go vegan diets. What's the science saying? So this was in 2021, and they're saying a well-planned vegan diet using supplementation is okay. So you have to supplement this diet. You can't not. So but what they're saying is that they haven't actually really got enough evidence, and they need more studies. They don't know if they're getting the key nutrients. The key nutrients are that iron, the calcium, the selenium, the zinc, and the iodine, B12, vitamin D, and your omega-3. And nutritional studies are very difficult to run because you're looking at lots of people and they're documenting what they're eating, and they can be quite tricky studies. Another sciencey one. So a study in 2022 in the European Journal of Nutrition. So a vegan diet can provide most nutrients with supplementation, so you've got to supplement. And in Nutrients 2023, so this was a later study, and they're saying vegan diet should be avoided during pregnancy and childhood. And the more restrictive the diet and the younger the child, the greater the risk of nutritional deficiency. So it's kind of a risk if you really don't know what you're doing there. So this is just a very simple summary. Plant-based diet that includes everything, really brilliant. A well-planned vegetarian diet where you're including all those foods groups, you're including the vitamins and minerals, really thinking about what you're eating, combining foods, great. A well-planned vegan diet for children, we don't have enough evidence to say whether this is a brilliant thing, and it's the sort of long-term effects on it as well, particularly for very young children go through their lives with a vegan diet. It's not to say that it's impossible. You've got to supplement, and you've got to really know what you're doing with the food, and be providing those sort of constant meals, making sure the protein's there, making sure the vitamins and minerals are there. So my takeaway from this, so as I was planning this webinar, I was thinking, well, I want to see lots of studies because often the nutritional studies are done on vegetarian and vegan diet versus the standard American diet. And it always comes out, of course, that the vegetarian vegan diets are better because they're comparing it to the standard American diet. So I'm thinking, I want to see studies of plant-based diets where people are eating lots and lots of plants, but they're not excluding anything from their diet. And I suddenly thought, this diet exists. This is the traditional Mediterranean diet. So the traditional Mediterranean diet is based around a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, a lot of plant-based foods, things like, stews and minestrones and all that kind of thing, and big salads. But of course, there is meat there is dairy there, that they include eggs and all those sort of foods. And you only have to put traditional Mediterranean diet into your PubMed search, and you come back with thousands of things about a traditional Mediterranean diet and the benefits particularly for adults, and the health benefits there. So that was a bit of a kind of takeaway. This is a takeaway moment for you. So I know it's easy for me to sit here in the south of France with all our lovely vegetables. It's very easy for us to eat in this way. It's more difficult from England, but it's basing your meals around a lot of veggies, a lot of like whole grains and beans, and including your salmon, and including some meat, and including your feta cheese, and including your eggs. Because the more foods you include, the less likely you are to run into deficiencies. And I did the summary twice then. Yeah, so that was my summary there. And then going back to there, that's a good takeaway as a traditional Mediterranean diet. So I think we actually do have a few minutes for a few questions. If anyone has any questions, I'll stop recording. And let me just stop recording. Oh, stop recording.